the most challenging environment. A publicly traded company is going to buy Bitcoin on behalf of other public shareholders.
Bitcoin is currently on a massive bull run and has become one of the hottest assets that is being talked about by almost everyone around the world. Some of the richest people in the world have been investing large amounts of money, and many corporations like Tesla even converting their business assets into Bitcoin due to the massive growth potential that the asset has shown, as well as the speculations that this will change the face of the financial world in the coming future. But many people still question why they should put their money in a volatile digital asset that is relatively new instead of opting for something much more secure with a long history of success in the market, such as gold. But the issue is not the understanding of the asset, but how they are told about it.
Resistant to corruption. It's the best anti-corrupt system we could come up with in the history of the world.
It is true that everyone resonates with a different set of metaphors, and it also depends on the context that they take it in when it comes to understanding the importance of Bitcoin. For example, if you are meeting with pure institutional investors in a formal institutional context, where there are about 6 people watching you sitting in a big conference room, then you would use a very formal language to explain Bitcoin as an uncorrelated synthetic safe haven asset. But when you are having a one-on-one conversation with someone from your team, the conversation would go a very different route. It will still be a formal meeting with a hierarchical set of supervisors such as your boss sitting right next to you, so you'd still be using a very constrained formal language. But imagine the same conversation outside of business in a heart-to-heart with a friend. It would then be a completely different thing and very informal with simple metaphors and jargon. So you have many different venues, right? The sermon, the social, the one-on-one professional, and then the formal business meeting, and the metaphors and the semantics you're allowed to use in every situation are different. Even with the same person in the one formal meeting, that would always go to the antiseptic and sterile metaphor. If you meet the same person in a one-on-one offsite, they might open up to you and have a more spiritual discussion, which they cannot do in front of your boss or other peers.
So everybody's walking on eggshells. What will the shareholders think? And we went to great lengths to treat the shareholders very transparently and respectfully. To the extent that we tendered to buy $250 million worth of our own stock at a premium, so as to give everybody an option to either buy, to opt into MicroStrategy with Bitcoin, or to exit at a profit if they didn't like the idea.
Michael Saylor tells a story in this regard where they bought Bitcoin corporately in probably the most challenging environment, which was a publicly traded company buying Bitcoin on behalf of other public shareholders. Everybody was walking on eggshells about what the shareholders would think. They went to great lengths to treat the shareholders very transparently and respectfully, to the extent that they tended to buy $250 million worth of their own stock at a premium, so as to give everybody an option to buy into MicroStrategy with Bitcoin or to exit at a profit. If they didn't like the idea, they would let them take an exit. They were basically spending $250 million in order to cushion the message, which is a lot of commitment. But having said that, they also announced a tender offer, and that is when the finance people asked, "How did the shareholders think about this?" The answer was that they were all generally pretty okay with it, except one shareholder who didn't like it.
And then in my private meeting with my investment advisors, they're telling me, you got to be concerned, but this is a big problem. And you can imagine the ripple, which is like, by the time you go through 7 layers, it's like, oh, there's going to be a big problem if you do this. This is that you got to do this. You can imagine why people act so constrained and conservative in their views when they're being filtered through layers.
So Michael met with them again in a personal meeting. There, he tells them that they purchased Bitcoin because they have this macroeconomic view and view Bitcoin as a great way to preserve the purchasing power and the treasure of the company. The alternative was to capitalize the company completely and give all the money back to the shareholders. But then they would not have any capital, and the guy agreed to learn more about Bitcoin. Michael then told him that Bitcoin is a decentralized crypto application and a proof-of-work network. The man cut him off and said, "Oh, I already know that I own Bitcoin. I own it." That is when Michael realized that the guy privately agreed with him and has already got some Bitcoin with him, but in his role as public representative of his investment company, he had to push back.
If you manage to build a communication channel directly, one-on-one, you'll actually generally be pleasantly surprised at the insight of humanity. So I think that the magic of Bitcoin is that engineering is arriving to economics for the first time in human history.
The point here is that sometimes the same person that believes one thing privately will say another thing publicly and even push back reflexively. But then, when they had gone one-on-one, Michael said he understood, and it was no problem. This is how problems arise in investing in Bitcoin. It's like a ripple effect, where things have to go through layers after layers and everyone agree on everything publicly, which in the future is going to be a big problem if it continues just like this. This is that you've got to do this. You can imagine why people act so constrained and conservative in their views when they're being filtered through layers. But if you manage to build a communication channel directly one-on-one, you will actually generally be pleasantly surprised at the inside of humanity. So, you should know that the real magic of Bitcoin is that engineering is arriving to economics for the first time in human history. And the challenge of gold is number one. The fact that it is a corruptible monetary system because it is centralized, and number two, it is not a closed monetary system. It's an open monetary system, not a closed engineering system that would have 21 million things in it and only heat can come in and go out. The mass cannot come in and go out. Bitcoin is a closed system because at 21 million Bitcoins, and you can heat it up, you can call it down. All closed thermodynamic systems are like that. That is the definition of a closed system. And the fact of the matter is that closed systems are a pretty good idea. An open system is when anyone can put more mass in or take mass out. Open systems have problems. You will struggle to solve and find a solution for in an open system because of the question of what mass is coming and going. And in gold, the openness is that anyone can mine more gold if they put in the resources. But you never know how much gold will come and go. So if you were building a monetary energy network on gold, it is bound to be corruptible because it's not closed. If then you decide to rebuild the monetary energy network on Bitcoin, which is a closed system and hopefully not corrupted, as well, or at least a lot less corrupt, it's crypto resistant to corruption. It's the best anti-corrupt system we could come up with in the history of the world. And that's a really important idea to spread for people to start to grasp, because only then will you be able to win all the engineers in the world to get Bitcoin when they start to understand that somebody engineered a monetary system for the first time in human history, because if there is anything we all agree on, we kind of generally like our engineering. The entire point of this discussion would be that Bitcoin is essentially one of the first ever monetary systems that has ever been engineered by someone on the computer that holds the power to bring massive change. All you need to do is tell people about it in a language they understand.
Open systems have problems. You can't solve You can't solve for a solution in an open system because of the question of what mass is coming and going. And number one, it's a corruptible monetary system because it's centralized. And number two, it's not a closed monetary system. It's an open monetary system. I mean, a closed engineering system would have 21 million things in it, and only heat can come in and go out. The mass can't come in and go out. Bitcoin is a closed system because there's 21 million Bitcoins, and you can heat it up, you can cool it down.